Let's get right into it. Number 10. Trial by honor. If your neighbor's dog pooped in your yard, you might have to fight them to the death. Also called trial by combat, it was a winner-takes-all court case where two people fought to the death instead of using lawyers. This wasn't a back alley brawl. It was a formal, government-approved event with rules, witnesses, and sometimes even a fancy ceremony. The logic was that God would help the person telling the truth win. If you accused someone of stealing your cow, you could challenge them to a duel. If you won, you were right. If you lost, you were wrong and dead. If you were too old or weak to fight, you could hire a professional fighter to duel for you. Like hiring a lawyer, except they stab people for you. This was legal in Britain until 1819. The last attempt was in 1818, when a man accused of murder challenged his accuser to a duel, and the accuser dropped the charges. Number 9. Legal piracy. Governments handed out special papers called letters of marque. These were a get-out-of-jail-free card for piracy. You could attack and rob enemy ships, and instead of jail, you'd get a pat on the back. This was incredibly common. During the American Revolution, the colonies used privateers to counter British naval superiority. Sometimes privateers got too excited about their job. You spot a ship in the distance. You think it might be an enemy ship, but you're not sure. But you've got that letter from the government, so you go for it. Next thing you know, you've accidentally robbed a ship from your own country. This happens so often they set up special courts just to deal with these mistakes. The British called these privateers legalized pirates. The whole system finally got shut down in 1856 when several nations met and agreed this was a bad idea. But the United States didn't sign this agreement. The U.S. Constitution still gives Congress the power to issue these letters. If World War III breaks out, Congress could legally turn your local fishing boat captain into a government-approved pirate. Number 8. Animal blood sports. In medieval London, a typical Saturday afternoon meant heading to the local arena to watch a bear chained to a post and attacked by a pack of dogs. This wasn't underground. It was mainstream entertainment, as normal as going to movies today. Kings and queens attended these shows. Queen Elizabeth I was such a big fan, she blocked all attempts to ban bear baiting during her reign. The bears weren't random. They were kept in special bear gardens and reused for years. Some became celebrities. One bear named Sackerson was so famous that Shakespeare mentioned him in a play. A bear forced to fight for its life was as famous as a movie star. Bulls would be chained up with pepper in their noses to make them aggressive. Then dogs were set loose. Cockfighting was so popular they built special cockpits just for these matches. Some of those buildings are still around today as restaurants or pubs. Bear baiting wasn't banned in England until 1835. Cockfighting was legal in parts of the United States until 2008. While people were using iPhones and watching YouTube, others were still legally watching roosters fight to the death. Even today, these blood sports continue underground. The FBI has a special task force just for busting illegal animal fighting rings. Number 7. Tossing waste into the street. In medieval cities like Edinburgh, after using your chamber pot, you'd open your window and yell, "Gardez-loo," before dumping it into the street. Gardez-loo was medieval for heads up, incoming poop. It comes from the French phrase garde l'eau, meaning watch out for the water. Though calling it water was pretty generous. Everyone did this, multiple times a day, in every city, for thousands of years. The streets were basically open sewers. People would try to walk close to buildings to avoid the splash zone in the middle of the street. That's actually where the tradition of men walking on the outside of the sidewalk came from. They were trying to protect women from getting splashed by passing carriages, hitting puddles of waste. And in Edinburgh, the poorest people lived on the ground floor, because no one wanted to deal with the constant shower of waste from above. The rich lived on the top floors where the air is cleaner. Nobody batted an eye at this. It's like how we don't think twice about flushing a toilet today. This went on until the 1800s when cities finally started building proper sewage systems. And it wasn't just because people suddenly got grossed out. It was because diseases like cholera were killing thousands. Turns out living in a city-sized toilet isn't great for public health. Now doing that is a fast track to a hefty fine. But next time you're annoyed about taking out the trash, just remember, at least you don't have to dodge flying chamber pots on your way to work. Number 6. Imprisonment for debt. You're late on your credit card payment. No big deal. Just a late fee and some angry letters from the bank. But for most of human history, that debt could land you in prison. We're talking years or even decades behind bars. You borrow money to start a small business, maybe a bakery, but then things go wrong. Maybe there's a bad harvest and flour gets too expensive. Suddenly you can't pay back your loan. Next thing you know, you're being dragged to a private prison owned by your creditor. While you're in prison, you still have to pay for your own food, clothing, and even the cost of being imprisoned. So your debt actually grows while you're locked up. Since you can't work to pay off the debt, you're basically trapped forever, unless your family could scrape together enough money to bail you out. Sometimes entire families would end up in these prisons. Children born to imprisoned debtors in England's Marshalsea prison would often spend their entire childhood behind bars, not because they did anything wrong, but because their parents couldn't pay their bills. New prisoners had to pay a fee called garnish to the other inmates. If they couldn't pay, the other prisoners would strip them naked and beat them with a wooden paddle. Today, people still get locked up for failing to pay court fees, traffic tickets, or child support. And just like in the old days, being in jail makes it pretty hard to earn money to pay off what you owe. Charles Dickens's father spent months in Marshalsea prison for a debt of £40. Number 5. Shaving a fortune. In medieval England, some people figured out a way to get rich with just a sharp knife and some coins. Back then, coins weren't just symbols of money. They were actually made of precious metals like gold and silver. Some clever folks figured out they could make money by literally shaving money. They'd take a coin and carefully scrape tiny amounts of gold or silver off the edges. Do this to enough coins, and suddenly you've got yourself a nice pile of precious metal. The coins would still work for buying stuff. No one would notice if their coin is a tiny bit smaller. If you got caught doing this, you weren't just going to jail. Coin clipping was considered high treason. That means you'd be executed in the most painful way possible. Technically, you weren't just stealing money, you were stealing from the king himself, since his face was on the coins, and kings tend to take that personally, but people still did it anyway. By the late 1600s, some English coins had lost nearly half their weight just from people shaving them. Imagine trying to buy something with a coin that's been on a medieval diet. The practice finally died out when they started putting ridges on coin edges. Those little lines on the edge of your quarters weren't put there to look pretty. They were put there to make it obvious if someone had been shaving the coin. Number 4. Crossing borders without a passport. For most of human history, you could walk up to any border and just walk through. No passport checks, no metal detectors, no grumpy border agents. Nobody batted an eye at this. For thousands of years, people wandered wherever they wanted. Needing permission to enter another country would have seemed as weird as needing permission to breathe air. Ancient Egypt had safe conduct papers, but these weren't like modern passports. They were just fancy letters saying, "This guy's cool, let him through." In medieval times, the closest thing to a passport was often just a letter from your local priest. Imagine showing up to airport security today with a note from your pastor. Then World War I changed everything. Countries got paranoid about who was coming and going. Before World War I, you could hop on a boat to anywhere without paperwork. Want to move to America? Just show up. Ellis Island didn't even exist until 1892, and even then, they just wanted to make sure you weren't obviously sick. Even the United States, land of "give me you're tired, you're poor," didn't require passports for citizens until 1941. Your great-grandparents probably remember when Americans could just leave. No passport, no problems. This switch from free movement to "papers, please" happened in just one generation. When passports were first introduced, lots of people thought they were temporary. Just until the war is over, they said. We're still waiting. This whole passport thing isn't some ancient tradition. It's newer than sliced bread. Otto Rohvetter invented the bread slicing machine in 1928. Mandatory passports came after 1941. The ability to buy pre-sliced bread is older than the requirement to show your papers at the border. Number 3. The original wonder drug. Ancient Egyptians used opium for everything. Calming crying babies, treating headaches. They even had a hieroglyph for it. The Greeks and Romans made their god of sleep, Morpheus, its patron. That's where we get the word morphine. In the 1800s, scientists isolated morphine from opium. They thought they'd created the perfect medicine, all the pain relief, none of the addiction. They were wrong. Then they made something even stronger, heroin. Bayer, the same company that makes aspirin, sold heroin as cough medicine for kids. The bottle literally said heroin right on it. No prescription needed. By the early 1900s, doctors realized these wonder drugs weren't so wonderful. People were getting hooked. Lives were being ruined. In 1914, the Harrison Narcotics Act changed everything. Suddenly, what had been a common medicine for thousands of years became illegal overnight. Something humans had been using since before we invented writing is now considered too dangerous to possess. Number 2. Selling your own children. Humans sold their own children for thousands of years. This wasn't about evil parents. It was about desperate people making desperate choices during the worst famines in history. Families that hadn't eaten in days, with children crying from hunger. Someone would offer enough food to keep the other children alive, in exchange for one child. During the northern Chinese famine of the late 19th century, children were literally being sold for a bag of grain, a human life for about a week's worth of food. There was actually a market rate for children during famines. The price would go down as more desperate parents tried to sell their kids. Supply and demand at its most horrifying. This happened everywhere humans faced extreme hardship. The messed up part is this was completely legal in most places. It wasn't even considered a crime. It was just seen as a tragic but normal response to extreme poverty. Today it's super illegal everywhere, but it hasn't completely stopped. In some parts of Afghanistan, there are still reports of families selling children to survive. Now we call it what it is: human trafficking. It's recognized as a serious crime. Number 1. The spoils of war. Imagine you're a soldier in ancient times. You just helped capture an enemy city. Your reward is everything you can carry. For thousands of years, looting was basically the military's bonus program, like a very aggressive Black Friday sale. Except instead of fighting over TVs, you're fighting over everything. This wasn't just random theft. This was official policy. Kings and generals would promise their soldiers the right to loot as payment, their version of a signing bonus. Except instead of a check, you get to raid someone's house. The Romans loved this practice. When they conquered Carthage, they spent 17 days carrying away everything that wasn't nailed down, and then they probably took the nails too. Some armies were so organized about looting, they had actual rules about who gets to steal what. It was like a corporate hierarchy of theft. Generals got the gold, officers got the silver, and regular soldiers got whatever was left. The Vikings took it to another level. It wasn't just about getting rich. Looting was psychological warfare. Nothing says we won like walking off with someone's entire treasury. This was standard practice for millennia, until someone finally decided armies shouldn't rob entire cities. Now, it's considered a war crime. Try explaining that to a Viking. Sorry, you can't take their stuff anymore. Here's a strongly worded letter from the UN instead. Some of the stuff looted thousands of years ago is still causing drama today. Museums are full of acquired artifacts that countries are now asking to have back. It's like the world's longest game of finders keepers, and nobody's happy about it. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.